you, Jacob. Okay, before I tell you what I want to talk about today, I don't want to ruin it, so let me start with this question. Who are, in your opinion, the 5 most prominent, most famous Old Testament characters? When I talk about Old Testament, men of God characters, who are they? Just shout them out. Moses, okay? Moses is one. Who else? Joshua. Ooh, Joshua's a good one. Who? David. Abraham. We can stop. I was looking for those 3. Abraham, Moses, and David. But I didn't know if I would get it in the top 3, so I said give me 5. But we got it in 4. So, thus proving my point. Abraham, Moses, and David. I want to talk about those guys. And since this is a little one-off class, I want to tell you where I'm coming from with this, because this is not the way that I feel personally. When I have flaws in my life, I know what those flaws are, and I'll say most of the time, I know what my flaws are. I feel my flaws. But if I think about my reaction to my own flaws, sin, mistakes that just keep popping up again and again and again, if I think about my own reaction to that, my criticism of myself would be that I don't normally feel bothered enough by my flaws, by my sin. That's my own personality. And I would even say maybe even a flaw. Like I would count that as a flaw. I recognize there are things wrong in my life, and I say, oh man, that's wrong. Moving right along. It doesn't paralyze me or get me down. Yeah?
Is your mic turned on?
Yes, it is. I will turn it off. We'll see if that works better. Just in case, no, still no trouble. Is it muted in OBS? Don't worry about it. Here's the thing. Just to answer your question, I don't know if anybody online will hear. I think we're going to have a lot online today. We've been having some internet trouble with the building, which is, I think that's been our problem with sound. It's been spotty, and so Spectrum is coming out tomorrow. I'm going to meet them at the building tomorrow. We're going to look at the modem. Don't know if that matters anymore, but there it is. Okay, so I don't know how to characterize myself and my problem with what I'm describing. I know my flaws, and it doesn't bother me enough, I think. Having said that, there are some folks, and I know that this is true, there are some folks who know and feel every single little mistake and flaw in their lives, and it paralyzes them. And I know that it's some of you who are like that, who are like, it gets you into a spot where you would think, I keep making these same mistakes over and over and over again, and you get discouraged by the sin, or by that self-refusal to fix the problem. Maybe it discourages you. The word that I use is, I've watched, it seems like I've watched people get paralyzed by it. It causes you to think, almost a sense of, why try? If I can't fix my problem and I'm going to keep dealing with the same thing, why try? And I'll stop here for just a second to let you make a comment about that if you have any thoughts about that. But since this is a one-off class, I thought that we would take an opportunity to address that personality. I don't hardly think about it because it's not me. And when I address it, it seems to be in personal conversations and stuff like this. But let's talk about today, let's talk about the person, if this is you, who has flaws or problems or sin in your life, which is not okay. We're not excusing the sin in this class and what we talk about. We're not excusing it. But at the same time, what I want us to say is, if you have problems or flaws or sin in your life, especially if you're one of these people who get super hard and down on yourself, it doesn't mean that you're condemned to hell and that's your eternal destiny because you've got something wrong. And I want to look at Abraham. I said, who are the most famous, prominent men of God, Bible characters in the Old Testament? We said Abraham, Moses, and David. And what I want to do this morning is take a look into those three lives, because those three, you said them, most prominent men in the Bible, those three guys have a lot of flaws. And we're gonna take a look at their lives. Maybe see if we can make some general points and application out of that. Anything that you want to say before we get started? Okay. What's Abraham most known for?
Promises.
What?
Promises.
Okay, God made his promises to him. And then his response?
He believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness.
Yeah, that's a nice quote from Romans/Genesis. He believed God, his faith. I think that's where I'm going to go with Abraham and his faith. Here's what I want to do. Let's look at a couple different passages. I'm going to ask several people just to read. So let me hand out some verses here in a second. We'll read them all. Who's going to read Acts 7, 2, and 3? Show me who it is. Benny, you got it? Acts 7, verses 2 and 3. And then after that, Joshua 24 and verse 4. Who's going to read that for us? Okay, Dave. Joshua 24 and verse 4. Benny, go ahead. Acts 7, 2 and 3.
To this he replied, brothers and fathers, listen to me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham while he was still in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran. Leave your country and your people, God said, and go to the land I will show you.
Okay. I'm specifically interested here in verse 2. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia. What's Mesopotamia characterized by religiously in this period of time? Faithfulness? Is this where we're going to see a faithful beacon and righteousness for God in the world? I mean, this is at this point in time, this is the heart of pagan idolatry. This is where you're going to find all of the biggest temples in the world. This is where you're going to find all kinds of that stuff. And so look at this one, Joshua 24 and verse 2, Dave.
And Joshua said to all the people, thus says the Lord God of Israel, your fathers included Terah, father of Abraham, and the father of Nahor, dwelt on the other side of the river in old times, and they served other gods.
So what's Abraham and his family coming from and their past? Do we ever think about that? I mean, we think about Abraham and his faith, and Abraham as the father of the Jewish people. But he came from Mesopotamia, and it tells us that he and his family come from a place where they served other gods. So this is just going to be starting place number one. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. It doesn't matter how bad the environment is that you're leaving to step into a life of faith and faithfulness. You look at Abraham and you see pagan idolatry and the hub of all of that stuff, and you see a person who is coming from a bad spot. And so I use that example to talk about somebody who says, I've got a terrible past. I've got all kinds of skeletons in my closet. There's no way that God will accept me, or why would he want me as a part of his family? Hey, listen, you listed Abraham as one of the most prominent Old Testament people, and he came from a shady background. So there's that. Comments about that one?
I think it's cool that God always calls out like that. Even in the Gospels, you see Christ dining with people who are pretty prideful and arrogant, but that's almost where God draws all of his people out, is from a poor situation. He didn't draw from the highest people in the nation of Israel. He pulled from the Roman tax collectors.
Yeah. I've done... I'm not sure that I can make this point 100%, but do you know the creation principle in Genesis, that the Latin words that describe God's creation? It's ex nihilo. It's out of nothing. There was nothing, and God created out of nothing. And we understand that with Genesis 1 and the creation of the universe, but I think that principle applies with people too. So, for example, you've got Abraham and Sarah, who are extremely old, and Sarah's past the time of childbearing, and it's that nothing situation that causes God to say, now I'm ready to work. Out of nothing, he creates. That's a good picture to think about this one. Other comments about that? Okay, let's talk about flaws. What flaws are there in Abraham's life that you know about? When God called him, let's just see the call. Genesis chapter 12. Genesis 12 verses 1 through 3 are, I always tell you, this is my second key passage of the Old Testament. This is a really big deal, the promise that God made to Abraham. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And he makes this great promise to Abraham. And then Ryan quoted from this just a minute ago in Genesis chapter 15. Abraham says, how are we going to do these promises, God? I don't have a child. And God says, no, I'm going to give you a child. And verse 6, Abraham believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. That faith was counted to Abraham as righteous. But moving from that point forward, where Abraham is now, he is the promised head. He is the guy from whom all of God's people, Israel, and eventually Jesus, and eventually us. He's the head of it all. But from this point in his story, what other flaws can you point out in Abraham's life? Yeah?
Well, twice he lies about his wife being his sister because he's afraid that he's going to get killed.
Okay.
And then the other one is he tries to help God with his promise by making his wife's servant as a mistress.
Okay. So let's start with that one just because it's next. In Genesis chapter 16, and not only is this good for a point, I think, to think about this in our own lives, but the specific point, we're talking about Abraham in connection with his faith. That's the thing that I want to remember. Abraham specifically in connection with his faith. And then you come over to Genesis chapter 16. Would somebody please read for us Genesis 16 verses 1 through 4.
Now Sarai, Abram's wife, has borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress.
So, would it be, this is a question, like I'm asking a legitimate question to you. Would it be a fair criticism of mine to look at Abraham and call this story a lack of faith?
I see a repetition of Genesis 3 in the fall, where here it looks reasonable, it's appealing. If I play this out in my mind, it makes sense, but is this what God said? And here it's not. If God says something, but it's not coming in the time you want it, then what's the next step? Well, it's wait and have faith. Wait and have faith. And that's the waiting is the faith building. I think that's what God's trying to do here for them.
Yeah.
Build their faith.
Yeah, so the waiting, and that, well, the faith in waiting is where I think he fell short. I feel a little bit guilty about this class. I'm sure I wouldn't appreciate very much if somebody opened up a book and was like, let's find all of Ryan's flaws and talk about them in a class. But other thoughts? Other comments about this story?
You wonder if his shortcoming here would have helped him realize I made a mistake and I wish we could do it over again. But when Isaac was told, he was told to offer Isaac, which is even more amazing, to go ahead and offer him as the sacrifice. He's got the weapon in his hand. He listened, maybe learned from this lesson. And I got to trust God all the way.
Yeah. So maybe it's the flaws, overcoming those flaws that will help us to build a foundation and not make the same mistakes in the future. Hopefully. That's ideally what we're getting at. I want to go back. Becky said something about the lying about his wife's situation. Back in chapter 12, I don't know if you have these marked. In this new Bible that I have, I don't have references that point me to other places in the Bible, so I have to write my own references. And I know a lot of you have this same kind of Bible. And so if that's true, you might want to write this cross-reference in the margin of your Bible so you can see it. God made the promise in chapter 12 that I'm going to give you this land and I'm going to make you a great nation. And then in chapter 12, starting in verse 10, so Abram went down, I guess I should start actually in verse 10. There was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. And when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarah his wife, I know that you're a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me. But they will let you live. Say that you're my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. First of all, remember the problem here is that she's past the age of childbearing, and he's worried that people are going to kill him because she's so good looking. I always think, wow, she's an older lady, and that's a legitimate concern. That's side thought. I know that there are some people who will read this story and they'll be like, well, it's kind of true. They had the same dad. Abraham and Sarah had the same dad but a different mom. But that's not the point. The point is, oh no, I'm going to die. Let's lie to get me out of this problem. And then here's the thing that you would mark as a cross-reference. In Genesis chapter 20, and I was thinking about this one with Ed's point before. Ed made this point to say, maybe these things happen in Abraham's life to help him build a foundation so that he wouldn't make the same mistakes later down the road. But in this story, he makes the exact same mistake twice. Starting in chapter 20 and verse 1. From there, Abram journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken. She is a man's wife." And there's the same thing twice. But that's it for Abraham, at least as far as I'm going to do in this class. But here's the thing. Maybe the thing that you get down on yourself about is my faith. I need more faith. I want more faith. I'm not happy with the flaws in my faith and the cracks in my faith, or whatever that might be. See, my personality is, I don't like to talk about this, and I don't talk about this often because I don't want to seem like we're offering permission to continue making mistakes. That's not what it is. But the people who get paralyzed by this stuff, we talk about Abraham as one of the most, you listed him. Like, as I think he was the first person that somebody said, or maybe the third person that somebody said. It was Moses and Joshua and then Abraham. We listed him as one of the most prominent people in the Old Testament as a character of God, and he's specifically noted for his faith, and his story is just pockmarked with examples of his lack of faith and flaws and mistakes that he made. The only thing I want to take from this class is you can't be paralyzed by your mistakes. You can't look at yourself and say, "Oh, I'm coming from a bad spot," or "I keep making this mistake again and again, and so why try? I'm going to quit. I'm going to give up." You can't do that. There's at least a biblical precedent for keep going. Anything you want to say about that one with Abraham? Yeah, Dave?
I think it reveals a lot about God and how much effort he's putting forth to build his faith. Okay, Abraham, you're struggling here. Let me give you another shot. Okay, you're struggling here again. Let me keep going. You need more time, whatever. But we're seeing a picture, an image of Abraham starting from where he's at. Good enough faith to go. And then God says, "Okay, I'm going to stretch it a little further. Okay, you can't reach that. So let's try that one again. Okay, you can't reach that." And then if we segue into us and our repetition of sins, but desire to get away from it, God will say, "This is a gap. This is a gap. This is a gap. We need to fill this in. We need to fill this in." And he will allow us the time to do that. But we have to take up arms against it, figure out ways to overcome it as well.
Yeah. So maybe, I think, Dave, when you make your comment, here's the thing that you make me think about. The fatal flaw is when we quit. It's not the mistake, because you can see biblical proof that mistakes can be recovered from and built upon, and we grow and do better. The fatal flaw is quitting. That would be I think your comment led me. I think that might be my main takeaway from that one. Others? Yeah, Morgan?
I think of friendships that I have with people who have struggled for 10 plus years, and it just, I don't know, it just reminded me like to have patience with friends or with ourselves, that there is like, no one's perfect, and if they're trying, that's all God is asking of us and of ourselves, and we're not held to
Yeah.
I think it's a lie Satan feeds to us sometimes that can be really distracting or pull you down or take your eye off the goal. Just keep telling God. Just keep
Yeah.
doing what he asks you to do.
I'm really glad, Morgan, for your comment, because I had this thought. It passed through my head when Dave was talking, and I thought, ooh, I'll comment about that. And then I forgot when I made the fatal flaw remark. And then you followed up with that second thing. It's not just, Dave's comment was, it helps me to think about God and God's patience with me and God's, okay, keep getting up. Here's the mark. Okay, you missed it. Get up and try again. But how about this? It should help us in our relationship with other people. And I tend to think, call it a criticism or not, I'm not sure what I would characterize this, but I've got some pretty high standards for folks. And I'm often not bashful about those. But sometimes it's like, okay, you made a mistake. Get back on the horse. Let's go again. Sort of a thing. If that's what God has done with me, that's how I should be with others. Okay, number one, faith. Abraham is a picture of faith more than anything else, and still had holes and imperfect faith, but still is what God would have him to be. Number two, let's talk about Moses. Would you turn over to Exodus chapter 3, please? And before you start reading Exodus chapter 3, what are you thinking in terms of this conversation with Moses? Where might we poke holes in his faith and faithfulness? Where are his flaws?
In leadership,
Why do you say that?
he was tasked with something that he verbally did not want to do and was in firm opposition. I mean, from his conversations that he had directly with God to his actions like killing the taskmaster, all of those are ways of him avoiding his role as a leader.
Okay. I hope I remember to come back to that one. But in terms of leadership, but your examples are good ones. Good examples. Other things that you think of with Moses? I mean, you listed him. One of the most prominent characters in the Old Testament. But
I was thinking that similar to what Ryan was mentioning, leadership, deflection of responsibility. Trying to tell God, no, this is not me, this is not for me, we need someone else. And he can't wriggle out of it, but he's trying as hard as he can.
okay. Lisa, and then Becky.
I wish we would all look at ourselves and how we do that today and not be so hard on some of the great examples in the Old Testament.
Like what? Can you think of anything off the top of your head?
Because we do the exact same thing and then dig our heels in.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time, to all of us. You know, I wish I could have been like Moses, who pressed on through it, and Abraham, and then offered my child up as a sacrifice, and did it all the way to the point of seeing the ram.
Okay. Yeah. That's my main point with Moses. I'll tell you what I'm ultimately going to try to establish with you. Number one, he didn't want to do the job, but you used the word pressed on through it. But he did anyway. And so one of my key words with Moses on my paper here is going to be perseverance.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, he was kind of the figurehead for all the complaining and grumbling from the people. They piled it on to him, and he felt that, and, you know, a lot of times he was interceding and like saying, God, don't destroy him, you know, give him more time, but then didn't he at one point ask God to just kill him because he could not deal with these people anymore? I find it very relatable.
Wow. I feel a little attacked. We are talking about people's flaws after all. Okay, so this one blows my mind. I'm in Exodus chapter 3 right now. This one blows my mind because we think about Moses as one of the most prominent people in the Bible. We all know, like, a leader of God's people. He's the lawgiver. Like, Moses is Moses. What else are you going to say about him? He is Moses of all people. And then the thing that blows my mind about that story is that he didn't want it. Moses is Moses, but he didn't want to do that job. And this is where, Ryan, I don't know, this might be just nitpicking, but this is where you said one of your flaws with Moses is leadership. I think that the way that I think I would say that is one of the great character traits of Moses is his leadership, because he didn't want to do it, but he did it anyway. I know that's not what you meant, but that's how I thought of that word anyway. Look at it. Here's the commission. Chapter 3 and verse 10. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said, this is number 1. You got one full hand to take care of Moses' excuses. So stick up number 1 right now. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? What is that? So Lisa said, I wish we could see these things in our lives. What does that excuse sound like or look like in my life? Ryan, you have a commission from God, and my response is, who am I? What is that? What does that look like? Or what's another way of wording the excuse?
We can do it with parenting very easily.
I'm sorry.
We can do it with parenting very easily. This kids are kids, it's just too big a job, and we turn and look another direction because we don't know what to do with the situation. It's very, very challenging.
Oh, yeah. So an excuse to get out of doing the thing?
Not that you're trying to find an excuse to get out of it, but it's a real challenge.
Okay. Lisa, Tracy?
I'm jumping ahead of your question probably, but I liked the response that God gives, but I will be with you. So it doesn't really matter our shortcomings and our, and the things that we feel insignificant about. It's what God expects, and our faith should be such that we trust that God will give us the tools we need.
Yeah. That's perfect. I think I should have done that first. When you see God's response, it helps to narrow down what the actual excuse is. Moses, this is what I want you to do. I'm just Moses. Who am I that you want me to do this thing? I'm just, and this is the translation for something into my life. I'm just Ryan. Like with the Abraham thing. I come from Mesopotamia. My background is filled with idolatry. I've got all of these issues, plus my faith. I've got these flaws and these who am I that you're going to send me to deal with Pharaoh of all people? And God's answer, so if we hold up number 1, this is excuse number 1. God's number 1 answer is, hey, I'm going to be with you. So guess what? It doesn't matter who you are. I'm the one supplying the power or the model. And so, okay, there's number 1. Number 2, verse 13, Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Excuse number 2. I don't even know, God, whoever you are, God talking to me. I'm going to go to this people and I'm going to say, God sent me, and they're going to say, who is he? Who's his name? I don't even know what to say to him about the name and who this God is. What does that sound like? I want you to take the gospel into all the nations and share the message of Jesus with the world. And what is almost always the number one excuse that comes back in that commission? I don't know enough. I'm not going to be able to say I have a Bible study with somebody, sit down and talk to somebody about, I don't know what to do with that. Moses says, I don't even know your name. And I think this is interesting in verse 14. This is almost a petty thing, but when I was preparing this material, I thought, I wonder if I'm seeing something here for the first time, maybe. Verse 14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And God also said to Moses, say to the people of Israel, the Lord, and that's all capitals, so that's Yahweh. He tells him his name. Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. So, you know what I am really interested in with that second response? God said to Moses, I am who I am. Moses said, I don't know who you are, and I don't know who to tell the people you are. But God's first response is, I am who I am, which is a picture of his eternal nature, like his godness. I just am. Which would be, I think maybe the thrust here might be something like, it doesn't matter if you know who I am or not, you know what I am. You know that I am God. You know that I am eternal. Say what you know. But then he tells him his name. Tell him I'm Yahweh. There you go. You don't know what to say? Here's what you say. I'll give it to you. Anything on that one? Remember this conversation. We're talking about Moses. And he's trying to get out of it. And listen to the excuses that he used. Number 3, chapter 4 and verse 1. Moses answered, but behold, they won't believe me or listen to my voice. I'm going to go to the people and I'm going to say these things to them, and they're just going to roll their eyes and not believe anything that I have to say. What's that excuse?
In context of sharing the gospel,
I'm sorry.
like when in the context of sharing the gospel, I think I've been talking to Ryan about this a lot lately, but like we doubt the power of God's word, and like if we will get in the way of it and think it depends on us, or it depends on how we deliver it, or the word choice. But we can have doubt in the message and the truth and the power of the gospel. And I think a lot of times that just is so easy for us to think, because we think we are so important,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and we're not.
Yeah. No, so God says, here, do these things. And he gives them a couple signs. And the key for this one, for me, in verse 5 is, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, God has appeared to you. They're not going to believe me. And God says, let me take care of that. I got that part covered. And guess what, Moses? They're still not going to believe you. But that doesn't matter. That's not what he's not sending them to make the people believe. He's sending them to give them a message. Okay, I'm going to run out of time. We're not going to get to David for sure. But excuse number 4, Moses said to the Lord, oh, my Lord, I'm not eloquent. I'm not a good speaker. And God says in verse 12, I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to speak. And then this is my favorite excuse, number 5. It's not even an excuse. He just says, please send someone else. Please don't make me do this thing. And this is where I don't want to lose sight of this class. This is Moses. You listed him as one of the most prominent people in the whole. He was the number 1 person listed as the most prominent people in the Old Testament. And he said to God, please don't make me do this thing. And God even still made provision. Look at Numbers chapter 11. This is Becky's low-key attack at me earlier. I like this one. I highlighted this one in the Bible because when you listen to the words that Moses speaks here, I don't know if you do this or not. I can feel his pain when he says this. Like when Moses says these words, I'm not even shoe deep in his shoes, but I can feel what he says. Just start in verse 10 to get some context. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. So, in this situation, it says Moses was displeased, and you might say, well, he's displeased at the people and they're complaining. No. Verse 11, Moses said to the Lord, why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth, that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give to their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give all this people? For they weep before me and say, give us meat that we may eat. This is the one that I highlighted that I feel every time I read it. I am not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. Moses is going to God and he says, I can't do this. And you can imagine in the back of his head he's saying, and I didn't want to do it from the start. I never wanted this. So he feels the pressure and he says, I can't do it. Verse 15, if you will treat me like this, kill me at once, if I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. And I'll just finish with this since the bell has rung. This is your reminder that we'll talk about Moses as this picture of faithfulness and leadership and what it means to be one of the people of God. And he didn't even want to do the job. And several times, more than just this one time, several times he said, please, I just want to end right now. And so, when you find yourself in those circumstances, the thing is, Lisa's comment, don't give up. The model and the lesson is, keep going, keep going, keep going. All right. Thank you all for talking through this class, and hopefully Stuart will be back next Sunday, and if he's not, we'll figure something out.